live in Madison, and in 2019, myself and 4 other people started Wisconsin food forests in order to plant more edible plants. Plant a whole acre or even half an acre. You can just start with 1 tree in your front yard. It helps if you have some sun if you're planting a food forest. Most of the plants that we install are fruiting plants, and fruiting plants prefer full sun. You can do a food forest in an existing forest with selective plantings in the shade of edible plants, like ramps, for example. But if you have sun, if you have a lawn, the most beautiful lawn you've ever seen in your entire life, that's the easiest thing to turn into a food forest. You just get yourself some cardboard, you get yourself some wood chips and some dirt, you cover up the lawn with the cardboard, you put some wood chips on top, and you can plant, and then the grass will die, and then next year you can plant even more. So the other really important thing you need is a water source. So a lot of people want to plant trees and shrubs, but if you don't have a way to water them or plan for how you're going to water them, they're probably going to die, especially if we have a drought again like we did this past summer. So if you're going to plant a food forest, you need a water source and preferably some sun. Also preferably some grass. Makes it easier to plant. Some of the plants that we use a lot in food forests are Juneberry or serviceberry. Amelanchier here is a scientific name. This is a picture of one blooming. It's also called Saskatoon or serviceberry. Some of them are native to Wisconsin. They produce a tasty berry that's good for birds and people. They come in various sizes, from 6 feet tall to 25 feet tall. They're a great plant. Raspberries and blackberries, we plant those a lot. We usually plant them in a line so that you can mow around them, or plant them on the edge of your food forest, because otherwise they will spread and they tend to take over. And then rhubarb is also super easy, nice edible plant, good for any food forest. This is a tart cherry tree in bloom in my backyard food forest. Tart cherries are going to be easier than sweet cherries in Wisconsin, so we plant a lot of tart cherries. There's also bushes. Tart cherries that grow on bushes if you have a smaller space. Some easy plants. They produce berries. Cherries, I should say. If you have shade, you can consider a pawpaw. A pawpaw is a plant that's native to this part of the United States, but a lot of people haven't heard of it. Their native range is Kentucky and Illinois, Pennsylvania, but now people are planting them in Wisconsin. It produces kind of a tropical fruit. It's sort of like a cross between a mango and a banana and a strawberry. But the reason you don't see them in the store is that when they're ripe, they fall off the tree and turn into a bag of goop. And so then you have to process them right away or eat them right away. So people make pawpaw ice cream or beer or bread with the frozen pulp. Or they'll eat them until they get sick of pawpaws. But it's a great tree. The deer and the rabbits don't eat it. It grows in shade. It's a native understory tree.
What's it taste like?
Kind of like a mango, strawberry, banana cross.
Sounds good.
It's
Right?
really good. However, the first time you eat them, you don't want to eat a lot because some people are allergic to them. So just take a small bite the first time you try.
Isn't there a rhyme or something that goes picking up pawpaws, putting them in your pocket?
Yeah.
I don't know where
Yeah, there is another plant called pawpaw. It's the name of several towns in the South, and in Kentucky, it's the name of streets. There's pawpaw festivals. It's a very well-known plant, but only in certain areas. The scientific name is Acima triloba. So if you look something up by the scientific or the botanic name, you'll get accurate information on the plant. So if you're interested in learning more, there's books about pawpaws. I've only eaten them twice. They're not that common, but I like them, and I don't think I'm allergic to them. So something to consider if you have a wooded area. You can plant them in full sun as well, but when they're little, you're supposed to put a little shelter on the south side of the tree. Like I had a cage around them, and then I put a piece of burlap on the south side, so it gave them a little shade when it was little. Yeah.
What kind of animals will eat pawpaw?
Raccoons will eat them. Possums. But the deer and the rabbits won't eat the branches usually. They'll leave them alone. So, but sometimes the forest animals will eat your pawpaws. There's another edible fruit that maybe you have not heard of. It's called honeyberry. It's actually an edible honeysuckle berry, but it's non-invasive like the honeysuckle shrubs that are taking over our native woodlands. This is what the flowers look like. They bloom early, so they usually bloom in April. This year they're probably going to bloom in May because it's been chilly. And then this is what the bushes look like when they're leafed out, and this is in May or June. And then the berries are kind of underneath these branches, so you have to either get down low or lie down to see the berries. A lot of people will put a tarp down or something on the ground, and then they'll shake the bushes to get the berries. They're very tasty. They're a little tart, but if you like currants and gooseberries, you'll like honeyberries. A little tart, a little sweet, good for eating fresh if you don't mind a little tartness, or good for making jam or jelly or whatever. But a very easy to grow shrub that's good for a food forest. When the trees and shrubs are young, you can plant other plants in between them because there'll still be plenty of shade. And so one of the things that we do is we plant edible flowers like these Johnny Jump Cups here. It's a plant that is also good for pollinators. We also plant chives a lot. Chives have edible flowers. The bunnies will usually leave them alone. So these plants can be planted in between your trees and shrubs, and so you can get some tasty edible flowers. Asparagus, of course. Everybody likes asparagus pretty much. It's a great plant for your food forest. It's easy to grow. The deer and rabbits usually leave it alone, and it's very good for you. Gooseberries do have thorns. It's a shrub that gets about 5 feet tall, but they're really tasty, I think. And the thorns do help protect them from rabbits. So if you don't fence them, they'll still be there when you come back in the springtime. So that's another pretty easy to grow one. You can consider using strawberries as a ground cover if you're having problems with weeds in your food forest, or you don't know what to plant for your ground layer. They make a nice ground cover. They do get some disease after about 7 years, and if you're growing them like this, the animals will get a lot of the fruit. They'll get some of the berries, but it'll mostly serve as a nice ground cover to help keep the weeds down. We also use a lot of Dutch white clover as a ground cover in the food forests, and that works pretty well too. All right, so here's some pictures. I only have pictures of baby food forests and mature food forests. I don't have any pictures of teenage food forests, unfortunately. But this is a young food forest that I planted next to a community garden. So the community gardeners maintain it and help with harvesting. So this is an example of a linear food forest. If you don't have a big open field, or if you're concerned about maintenance or access to harvest your plants, you can plant your food forest in a line. It doesn't have to be like a traditional forest. It can be a line of trees, shrubs, herbs, edible flowers. You can also put in some plants for pollinators like bee balm or yarrow or purple coneflower in between the trees and shrubs. This one has some pear trees, and then it has some cornelian cherries, which is it's a dogwood with an edible fruit. And then down in the bottom here, they wanted some apple trees. We usually don't plant a lot of apple trees because if you're not going to spray, you're going to have a lot of pests and diseases on your apples. They're difficult to grow here in Wisconsin without spraying. And so, that's what one of the community gardeners wanted, so we planted some apples. And then in between the plants, we did some strawberries and we did some currants. And then you can also put herbs in between. And also, when the plants are young, you could plant a tomato plant right here. You could plant a pepper plant. As long as you have full sun, these trees and shrubs are going to be pretty slow growing. So the first 2 or 3 or even 4 years, you could plant annual plants in between your perennial plants, your trees and shrubs. This is a mature food forest on the west side of Madison. So we have crabapple trees. We have the Dutch white clover as a ground cover. We have comfrey, which is a very useful plant. It's also a nitrogen fixer. It's good for pollinators. It has many, many uses. We have yarrow. We have lupin. We have chives, bee balm, spiderwort, plants for pollinators. And then the mushrooms are moved in. You could plant edible mushrooms in your wood chip layer, but these are not edible. But they're a sign of a healthy forest. If you have some fungus in your food forest, it's a sign that you have healthy soil.
So I had a question
Sure.
about mushrooms. So would it be part of a food forest to inoculate part of the soil with like mushroom spores?
Yeah. Yeah,
Or
you
is
can-
that something that we just let happen on its own?
If you want edible mushrooms, you usually have to inoculate the wood chips yourself, and usually it's the wine cap mushrooms that grow well in the wood chips. There's also edible mushrooms that grow well on logs, but you probably need to bring in the logs already inoculated. Most of the edible mushrooms you have to kind of plan ahead and plan to bring in the spawn from the mushrooms. They make your food forest better. You can add some mushrooms in. Okay, so this is another part of that food forest. So we have some garlic chives that have taken over and kind of become the ground cover layer. We have some milkweed, which is good for pollinators and also has edible parts, the common milkweed. We have some goldenrod. These are the crabapple trees. Many other plants in there. I'm not sure what, but it becomes a self-sustaining ecosystem after you've planted and you've maintained it for the first 2 or 3 years. Then the plants kind of all grow together, and then there's much less weeding. You don't have to water anymore. The leaves just kind of fall down to the ground and provide the fertilizer for the plants. Basically all you have to do is go in and prune in the early spring. You prune the fruit trees and the bushes, and then harvesting. So once the food forest is mature, there's a lot less maintenance. And the reason is that when you're planting, you're kind of mimicking Mother Nature and how nature plants a forest, with all the plants kind of close together and intertwined. If you do that, they kind of help each other out, and that really helps keep the weeds from getting in there. This is a really happy and healthy elderberry, which produces berries that can help keep you from getting the flu in the wintertime. And this is an enormous rhubarb, which is also happy and healthy. It's part of the edge of a food forest. This is a front yard food forest in Madison. So here we have a hazelnut bush. We have some purple coneflower. We have some fruit trees back here. This is a hardy vine called hardy kiwi. It produces a little fruit that's very much like the big tropical kiwi that you can buy at the store, but it's hardy here in Wisconsin, and you can eat the whole thing. In the back, we have some sunchokes. They are a sunflower with an edible root that's kind of like a potato-ish, and then many other plants in here as well. You can also include plants that are not necessarily good for pollinators or edible or native. I call them the nod to beauty. And so this is an example here. These are naked ladies, they call them. The leaves come up in the spring and it's just the leaves, and then in the fall it's just the flower stalks like this. So you could include plants like that in your food forest if you want. I have some peonies in my backyard. So here's another view of a food forest. So we have some perennial kale, which is growing right there, and then many other plants. Not sure. I think there's some pear trees back there. But almost everything that you see is either edible or medicinal or native or good for pollinators. Those are a lot of the plants that we select for food forests. But you could definitely still include your peonies and your naked ladies if you want to. So this is the food forest that we planted, Wisconsin Food Forests in Madison. We started in 2020, and this space here was just a blank slate. It was just lawn, and so we worked together with the neighborhood. We met with the alder. We went to the neighborhood meetings. We created a survey for the neighborhood for what plants they wanted to see at the food forest. As you can see, we have an enormous pile of wood chips back here. Wood chips are very useful when you're sheet mulching over your lawn to get rid of the grass. And then we made these 3 planting beds right here. And we have a sign, and we have a bench, and now it's become a neighborhood gathering place. We have neighborhood markets here. We have many different events that will meet at the food forest because everybody kind of knows where it is. And we also just got some stumps, and it's become a little playground for little kids. They just come and climb on the stumps, and everybody has really enjoyed it. It's been really great. So we have some rhubarb and asparagus and strawberries and other plants back here. We have some little pear trees, and then we planted some tomatoes because we have plenty of sun. And so you dig a little hole in the wood chips, dig down through the cardboard, get down to the ground. Then you add a couple scoops of compost, and then you plant your tomato or your pumpkin or your kale or whatever that you want to grow while the trees are small. You can grow some of your annual vegetables in there. In this section, we have more tomatoes. We have some hardy apricot trees. We have some elderberry back there. We have some currants and some gooseberries. And then we also planted some garlic and some thyme in this section. And then I scattered some, in the fall, I scattered some Dutch white clover seeds all around. So at almost all of our food forests, we try to include a handmade bench. And this Lansing Food Forest, we raised the money because of Tom's daughter. Tom had recently passed away, and so she wanted to donate to an organization that was environmentally friendly. So she organized the Zumba-thon. Has anybody ever done Zumba? It's high energy dancing to fun music, and it's a really good workout. And so we charged money for people to come, and then we had a silent auction, and we raised enough money to cover the cost of the food forest and the bench. So this is the back of the bench at the Lansing Food Forest. I think that's it. presentation, or it froze up.
No, the screen's still working.
Okay. That's the end.
Looks like it.
Yeah, that's the last one. Any questions?
So you're starting these all in sunny places with small trees, but I've got existing forests that I'm working with. So there's enough shade that there's some things I just can't do. Have you got any suggestions for how to go about it differently in an existing forest?
There's a couple of books. One of them is called Farming the Woods, and I'm forgetting the name of the other one. But it's it's the Woodland Homestead is the other one. So basically, you have to research what plants that you want, and then figure out what light levels they need. And if there's a plant that you want and it needs part sun, you might have to cut down some of your existing trees.
Yep.
But if there's a plant that you want that can handle full shade, like ramps or mushroom logs or pawpaw can also handle a lot of shade. Basically, just have to clear a little spot for it.
I've got pawpaws out the wazoo.
Okay.
I can hardly wait for fruit.
Okay,
It might be
nice.
a year or two yet.
Nice.
That's exciting.
So yeah, it's just basically trying to clear a little spot and then keeping the weeds and the other plants at bay for a few years while they get established. And the way that we do that is we kind of clear the little area, and then we'll put a circle of cardboard down around where we're planting, and then we'll put wood chips or logs on top, and the cardboard helps kind of suppress the plants in the immediate area so that the young plant can get started.
How long does it take for pawpaws to fruit?
To fruit. Usually it's 6 years about. Sometimes it's 5 years, sometimes it's 7 years. So most of the trees it takes longer. For the shrubs it only takes 2 or 3 years. And then, like I said, when they're small, you can plant your annual plants in between, and so then you can get a harvest even the first year.
You said raspberries are good for like the edge of this. I'm wondering, would they be good for like that strip of yard that is like kind of yours, kind of the city between sidewalk and road?
Yeah. They do tend to creep, so that's why I say try to plant them in a line where you can mow around them, or plant them on the edge of something, like the area between your driveway and your neighbor's driveway is another possibility. You would have to kind of contain them if they were in that space between the sidewalk and the street, because you wouldn't want them to be blocking your view when you're backing out of your driveway. So you would have to kind of keep them back from the street by either mowing or pruning them if they try to move towards the street.
I
Yes.
have a question. So you're planting these little trees and you're planting other crops that need sun. So what happens when the trees get big and shaded?
Then we stop planting the annual plants. So you can plant the annual plants every year up until, it depends on your spacing, like how far apart you planted the trees. But up until year 5 or even 6 or 7, you can still sneak in some annuals in the sunny spaces. And then once you have some shade, you can transition to planting shade-tolerant edibles if you want under the trees.
So are there many shade-tolerant edibles?
There's a few ramps, mushroom logs. I said spring beauty, which is it's a native woodland wildflower. It's edible. toothwort is edible. Violets, they also make an excellent ground cover, and they are edible. You can also try planting little bits of greens or roots, because those are more shade tolerant than fruiting plants. So like a little bit of lettuce or spinach or kale, some carrots or some beets will tolerate some shady areas.
Okay.
You'd have to fence some of those for if you have rabbits though.
I have tons of rats.
I was gonna say, like, the
You'd think I
two
was one of them.
wildlife in this town that are everywhere, the rabbits and the deer.
Yeah, so we fence a lot of the plants when they're young. And then once they're about 3 years old, then you can take off some of the fences because they become more established and they're able to come back even if they're eaten. But it depends on the pest pressure in your yard. Sometimes you have to leave the fences on for some of the plants.
Actually, a question related to that, is there anything you can plant, like, that specifically attracts those animals, that they might be more drawn to eat than, like, the things you want to eat yourself?
Not that I know of. I've heard of people planting barrier plants to kind of keep the deer, especially, out from their plants that they want to keep. So barrier plants would be like thorny plants or plants that the deer don't like to eat, and planting those on the edge of your property. And then that kind of sometimes keeps the deer from coming into the center where you have the more tasty plants. But it depends on how many deer you have and what your situation is and where the deer normally walk through your property.
You said the apple trees needed to be sprayed. Do you know what kind of stuff they use for that?
Well, it depends. There's organic sprays for apples, but a lot of farmers around this area are not growing organic apples, so they're using pesticides, and I don't know all the names of them, but I mean sometimes they use sprays that are considered organic, like neem oil. This one. You can spray kaolin clay, which is a very fine particle clay, and you spray that all over, and it helps keep the bugs from eating your apples because they don't want to eat clay. Right?
Fair.
There's a
Is it bentonite or some other clay or?
sulfur. A lot of farmers will spray sulfur. Yeah. If you get a book on fruit growing, like a book about orcharding, it can probably explain more about what you have to do.
I have 2 apple trees, so I'm wanting them to fruit. They're about 4 years old. So I need to use something that's, natural. I want to use something that's natural.
Because yeah, I assume the problem with bringing a pesticide into this sort of planning is it's going to be bad for the other things you're trying to grow.
Yeah. When we plant the food forests, the idea is that they won't be sprayed with pesticides. So we're planting things that you can grow without having to spray in Wisconsin.
The like town food forest that you guys worked on, what was that process like? Because I know there's a property in town on 8th Street that the town owns that's just an empty lot that seems like it'd be a really good place for something like this.
Okay. So about 15 years ago, there was a group in Madison called Madison Fruits and Nuts, and they wanted more edible plants on city property, and so it took like 3 or 4 years of going to meetings, going to more meetings, going to another meeting, organizing people to talk to their town representative or their alder, as they call it in Madison. And then they finally got a resolution, so they got a plan written up, and then it had to be approved, But, so it did take a while. But now, if you go on the City of Madison website, there's a edible landscape permit process page where you can go and it has all the things you have to do if you want to plant on city land. And they don't really want you to plant on park land. The land that's owned by the Parks Department has been very difficult to plant on. So the ones that would be had success would be the water utility land. So the picture that I showed of the linear food forest is on, there's a well on that property, so it's owned by the water utility. And so they let us do one there. And then the Lansing food forest property was owned by city engineering. It was just kind of a little leftover piece from when they kind of changed the plan of that neighborhood. They had this little leftover piece, and it's close to Starkweather Creek, so they didn't really want to plant a house, or put a house there, and so they said that we could put our food forest there. So it takes going to a lot of city meetings and talking to a lot of people to get the process started.
So if we want to try to do this on public land, we should probably try to turn this into a group of people working on
Yeah.
that.
Yep,
Okay.
exactly. Organize, talk to your city representatives.
So where is the place on 8th Street?
There's a place,
Big open place, I know where it is.
right by the church, like one of the many churches on 8th Street. It's just that big empty lot that sometimes gets, if you've been on 8th, like a lot of times it grows into just tall grasses. There's a woodland behind it. It's, from what I've seen in the community group, it's owned by the town.
Okay.
And it's one of the places that they were like, maybe we should bring the derby here if it can't be out at Nishan. But it's not a good spot for that. It's almost down by Pineview.
Yeah, it's between a apartment complex and a church.
Yes.
Okay.
And so they mow it occasionally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just, that's all it's, like there's crows out there sometimes.
Yeah.
That's basically it.
Do we know how long it's been sitting there, just empty, or?
The whole time I've been here.
Mhm. I don't think there's ever been anything.
Yeah, it doesn't look like there's ever been
The other place would be out by, on Granite Avenue by
Are you
Monkey's
kidding?
Pond.
You are completely right about that.
Because, one time they wanted to do a community garden, but that never really
Condos
took
and then a
off.
great big field
But
and then
I
a
think
church
if you
and
had a
then a-
group that
and
would
then
say
a
they
school.
would be in
That
charge
usually
of
means that
managing the food
there's
forest, because there's
not
already
really
a
a
crab
lot of
entry there
economic
where that
value
home
to
used to
it,
be.
or
And there's
will
the
be
benches
to
there.
it, and so it'd be okay.
That's
with
a
it.
I would think they would be
Maybe use
separate
it for
because they
that
want to use
purpose.
it, for
I
something.
used to
And I don't know that they have any
Like, oh.
plans, but
Right,
but
exactly, sure.
a food forest could
Sometimes
handle.
too.
Yeah.
It doesn't flood all the time, so
So 3 or 4
That's a
years,
really good
this is
spot, I
really
guess.
it'd be kind of pretty, because it'd be kind of already started.
It would be, it's already kind of
Piping all this stuff, that's not gonna do me any good, but the people who own my property long after I die are gonna have
The
great
diversity
food.
is what's
Oh,
important.
yeah, that's what I'm doing it for.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not gonna do me any good, but
Well, maybe
It's-
it
We're all
might,
done.
the world could end tomorrow, and we could have to go into the
Oh,
and forage.
We're doing questions.
I am grateful to live in an area surrounded by woodlands, so if it comes to that, it's a choice.
With plenty of deer.